Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Live. Well, the latest stimulus negotiations are really underscoring how many Americans continue to struggle while we see the wealthier continue to get richer. It's a narrative that leaves many to wonder whether money will always lay concentrated in the hands of the few. We have Lance Morrow here with us. He's a Time Magazine and Wall Street Journal columnist and author of the book God and Mammon, Chronicles of American Money. We also have Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman here joining us for this conversation. So, Lance, I want to start with you on this book, on how important money is in this country. And that's a gross oversimplification of what's in your book. But I'm hoping you can give us a quick run through of what readers can expect.
Well, the premise of the book is that money is the American thing. Money has a unique position in American history and in the American almost theology, because it was money that brought people here in the first place, and money in a very large and diverse country becomes the common denominator. Tocqueville, writing about money in America, said that it's a prime or at least a secondary motivation in everything the Americans do. He said that in the 1830s, and so it's a very interesting American subject, and it is. I call it God and Mammon because religion and materialism and God and Mammon are intertwined in a kind of partnership all through American history. And I talk about, I start at the very beginning and before the beginning, and then go up through, I examine money as it manifests itself and the dilemmas of money and so on, as they became manifest in certain lives, American lives. For example, the Brown brothers of Providence, Rhode Island, John and Moses, and they were the family that Brown University was named for, and they were very prominent in the Revolution and so on. But John was a very active trader, financier in the slave trade, and his brother Moses was an extremely important abolitionist. And so you had this family, this very important New England family, and one was an abolitionist, one was a slave trader. They debated constantly. They remained on good and loving terms, but this immense issue between them went on for years and years, which is a very interesting American story because, of course, in the history of the country, that same issue remains to this day a very prominent subject.
Well, speaking of that, Lance, I'm wondering, because you mentioned the dilemma of money a moment ago, and it seems as if the country right now is more deeply divided than ever before. And one of the ways is through wealth inequality. I'm wondering how you see that gap historically, and if we're worse off or better off for it.
Well, it's been I think it's more severe. It strikes me as more severe now than before. It seems to me that the inequality was less pronounced in some of the earlier days. For example, when Tocqueville was writing about the country, there was a more expansive sense of the opportunity and the availability of these abundant resources. So I would say that the sense of inequality and the sense of something askew in that arrangement is more pronounced now, particularly because of the various distresses that we see that we're going through. But
can you, on that note, can you, so this populism that President Trump has been able to whip up, including when he was a candidate, do you see precedents for that or analogies in other eras of American history?
Trump is of course, an extraordinary phenomenon in his own, he is a unique character. But I would say that there have always been, it's always been a binary country in many ways. There's always been the Eastern establishment versus the people beyond the mountains, for example. The Jacksonian phenomenon in the 1830s, and the arising of the people beyond the mountains, that would be one precedent. I think the populism in in the 1890s was analogous in certain ways. The William Jennings Bryan and "You shall not crucify us on a cross of gold" speech in 1896 to the Democratic Convention was somewhat symptomatic of this kind of populism. I think the cultural divide, the bitterness of the cultural divide in the United States now seems to me to be very, very deep, and so I think that is highly unusual.
So we've been through these periods of turbulence before. You could argue, I guess, America comes out better and stronger than it used to be. Do you feel like we're okay as a country, or do you feel like we're in some sort of peril?
I think we're in some trouble, and I think that in my long lifetime, I think this is as bitter a division as I've seen, and I have a very vivid memory of 1968, and I wrote about it a great deal, and I was there in Chicago at the convention when all hell broke loose, and I think the divisions now are really, there's such a profound difference in, it's two different universes, and so I think it's troubling. I hope that it's going to eventually subside, and that these differences will subside, and that we'll come to some new kind of coalescence. And I suspect that's what's going to happen. But there's no doubt. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East during the first Intifada in Israel and Palestine, and I would go and spend days and days and days up in the West Bank in Gaza talking to Palestinians. Then I would go and spend days and days in Israel talking to Israelis, and they were two separate universes. They were two utterly different points of view, each of them coherent in its own terms, but you couldn't put them together in this very small place. Well, the United States is a very big place, and it's a very diverse country, but there is almost an Israeli-Palestinian divide. Somehow it feels that way to me, and so I worry a lot. I think that, and I don't think it's going to calm down. I think it's gonna. I mean, after the inauguration and so on, I suspect it's going to go on for a while.
All right, Lance Morrow, author of God and Mammon, Chronicles of American Money. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you as well, Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman, for this conversation.